I live in a small condo or apartment. It's about 500 square foot, and it has no shady history. It was built in the 80s, we knew who the last owners were, and they owned it for a decade and are definitely still alive. We've been here for almost 4 years. It's just me and my husband. Husband and I were getting ready for bed. I was out for a smoke, so he did his teeth and all that before me, and got into bed maybe 5 minutes or less before I got inside from the porch. You can see the door to the bathroom from the kitchen, but it's partially blocked off by a half wall, separating the kitchen from the entrance hall and then the bathroom at the other side. So I walked to the sink to grab some water. I saw a figurehead into the washroom and then heard what sounded close to dry heaving, like that gurgle backwash sound that someone makes when they might puke but haven't quite done it yet. The door to the bathroom was still open, but I couldn't see the toilet from where I'm standing. Knowing my husband is fairly private for that stuff, I stood there for a moment and listened. I heard more gurgling and dry heaving. He didn't come out, so I slowly crept up to the door to ask if he was okay, while still trying to maintain his privacy by not seeing the toilet. He replied from the bathroom, down the hall. He asked me to repeat what I said because he hadn't quite heard me. Confused, I went fully into the bathroom and there was no one there. I would just chalk up to the toilet or shower making noises, but I definitely thought I saw someone walk in there, and then the noises happened for a good half a minute after. So I'm feeling like I'm losing my mind. My name is Agnaldo Alreiroz. I'm 44 years old and I live in Brazil. I'm new to Reddit, and this is my first post. I apologise in advance for my limited English. I would like to share my story and have your opinion. When I was 20 years old, the year was 1996. A couple friends of my mother lost their home, and as Brazil was going through a very severe economic crisis at the time, and my mother seeing the situation of the couple, she invited them to temporarily live in our house. They slept in the living room, on a mattress, and the guy was an alcoholic. He often fought with his wife. When he came home from the street, tired from work, he was always a person very nasty and grumpy, and always drunk. My brothers and I kept some distance from him to avoid getting upset, but this guy always harassed us and said bad things, which hurt us. A few days later, we convinced our mother to send this couple away, but they just left because he and his wife stole money from my mother. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been kicked out of our house. So on the day they left home, this couple stayed outside the house in the car, packing their bags. And my brother and I, we went in and out of the house with their bags, and they were packing in the car. It so happens that there was no one in the house, except me, my brother, and the couple who were on the street, in the car. There was an old stereo in our house, which was ours, in the back room. And when we were on the street, together with the couple, delivering another batch of bags, this sound turned into a rock, very high. The four of us on the street looked at each other in amazement, and we commented, how can this happen? Since there was no one in the background. It was just the four of us, and we were on the streets at the gate. Then we entered the house, and I myself not only turned off the stereo using the power off button, but I also unplugged it, because I was very scared. We took the last bags, and again in the streets, the sound turned on the same song, for the second time, very loud. Well, I turned it off myself. I unplugged the power cord. That's unbelievable. We dropped the bags on the floor with the couple and ran to see how this happened. And to our surprise, in addition to the sound being turned on, the wire was plugged into the socket. Well, I'm a skeptical person and I'm not mystic, but I can't deny what I saw that afternoon. And really, I can't explain how it happened. I can assure you there was no one in the house but the four of us, and both times the stereo turned on itself. And it's a mystery. I can't solve it inside my head, as I've already thought about it, but it's inconclusive. The witnesses in the case directly are me and my brother, and the couple who testified indirectly that day. This happened about 3 years back now. My friend and I were 15 and 14 at the time, me being the older one. In 2019, my friend, who I will call Nim, was house-sitting a friend's dogs. The family lived in the country, and most cars we saw drive by there were less than 5. Nim was staying the week watching 4 labs. He knew the house was haunted because they'd hear the occasional footsteps on the stairs, or the dogs would start barking at the staircase and be too scared to go up them. They spent the first night along, the next 3 nights with our other friend. The friend got too freaked out because they started seeing people staring at them through the windows, while outside, or they'd hear laughter and talking upstairs. The friend left, and Nim invited me to stay the last 3 days with them. Nim told me the house was haunted and everything that had happened. I'd never had any bad experience with the paranormal before, so I wasn't really worried. We were sleeping in the living room, and the first night, nothing really went on. The second night, we heard footsteps go up the stairs, and sometimes we heard someone talking, but neither of us really minded. We both have always been believers, and neither of us wanted to upset any spirits that were possibly there, so we didn't talk about it. The third night was when shit hit the fan. Nim's dad had ordered us pizza, then we sat on the road while eating it. Nim had sent me inside to get something, maybe cups. I went straight to the kitchen and went back out. To get to the kitchen, we had to pass by the living room, but we wouldn't have been anywhere near the windows. When I went back out, Nim asked if I sat on the couch and looked at them through the window. I simply told them no, and we shrugged it off and continued eating. Nim had gone inside because neither of us remembered to grab napkins. I'm generally the protective friend, so I watched Nim go in case they got too freaked out or in case they tripped. I looked at the same window they saw me in, and I saw them looking at me as well. When Nim came out, I asked if they did what I did, and they said no. I went to the bathroom first, then grabbed the napkins, and then came straight out. The bathroom was in the kitchen. Fast forward, we go inside, and Nim was fast asleep on the couch. It was an L shape, so it was fairly big. I had 3 of the labs with me, one by my head, another by my feet, and another on the floor next to me. It was past midnight, and I was scrolling through my phone. I heard the youngest lab next to me growling at the arched doorway, and when I looked, he was stood up and staring at the doorway. The one at my feet was stood up on the couch, but not growling, while the one by my head was still laying down. He was looking at the doorway like the other 2. I didn't care too much as I had heard footsteps running up the stairs and giggling all night, so I thought they were growling at the stairs. I only actually looked at the doorway when the oldest by my head had climbed over my legs and was growling. I turned off my phone and sat up. When I looked where they were, I saw a black figure standing there. There was enough shining in the dining room to outline the figure. Of course, I panicked a bit, because it just supposed to be Nim and I. I didn't move from the spot even when the thing looked at me. I don't know how long I held eye contact with it. All I knew was I was too scared to move from my spot. I felt like I was paralysed. The 3 dogs by me had all stood up and were staring at the figure. 2 were growling and 1 was whimpering. I didn't realise it was walking towards me until it got to the door frame. That's when I finally moved and jumped over to Nim and woke them up. The 4th dog woke up since they were cuddling with Nim, and the other 3 still looked angry or upset at the doorway. I tried telling Nim what happened and even played out to them what I saw. I don't know if they believed me, but I'm sure me having a panic attack and almost crying from fear was convincing enough. Nim stayed up with me and I didn't sleep until I got back home. I don't think I've ever been so happy to leave a place. My first paranormal encounter was when my mom's college lost her daughter in a car accident, and she was feeling so guilty, blaming herself about the loss of her daughter. Later on, found a person, who I'm going to address as the lady, could help her to communicate with her daughter's spirit. So, the sorrowful mother managed a seance, the type where they summoned spirits through a host body, and invited my parents and also a bunch of other people, including her colleagues. That night, I accompanied my mom too. We need a host body, as that spirit can possess, the lady said. My mom, without any hesitation, volunteered. It's kind of blurry for me, but as far as I remember, my mother knew my father wouldn't let her come forward. So before volunteering, she told my father to get my brother here too, because he's home alone. Fast forward to a couple of minutes later, as my mom was lying on her back with her eyes closed and palms facing up. She suddenly started saying some words. The lady looked at us and said a lost ghost had possessed my mom's body. The ghost, as the lady said, was a man, and my mom started mumbling slowly and said, "Give me the book." The lady said she's asking for the Quran. As we handed her the Quran, the lady puts it on my mom's chest with her hands placed on the book. He started reciting some random verses in Arabic. Afterwards, my mom prostrates, lying stretched out on the ground with one's face downwards, to every cardinal direction as if he was praying. I was a little kid and didn't know what was going on though. But if stumbled upon this scene now, I would wet my pants. The lady threatened the ghost that if you do not leave this body, I will do blah. Cannot remember what she said. Before I forget, let me mention that her daughter's name is Mahdi. Eventually, the lady looked back at us and said, "I believe she is Mahdi." They first asked her name, and my mom very slowly, with a voice of a dehydrated person, said, "Mahdi." Next, the lady asked her to write down her name on a piece of paper given to her. She barely wrote, "Mahdi." I remember vividly, it was like a kid's handwriting. Her mom couldn't contain herself anymore, and in a quavering voice said, "Baby, it's all my fault. Forgive me. I shouldn't have let you go out that night. I'm sorry." "I love you, Mom," her daughter said. "I have to go," she continued, as if somebody was calling her. Years later, when my mom was retelling the story, I asked her, "So, where were you the whole time?" "Somewhere bright and white as far as the eye can see. And I saw heads floating around with no body attached to them, just faces," she replied. I don't remember whether she mentioned that she saw her father or not. That's one of the paranormal experiences, and I've encountered them myself, too. Back when I was 18, my friends and I decided to go on a trip to some rural area to relax on our own for a couple days. Luckily, my late grandparents owned a medium-sized house in a remote village. There are plenty of those where I'm from. So I got the keys from my dad, and we packed food, water, and a first aid kit, and we headed there. It was a 2-hour ride from the closest city to get there. The car dropped us off in the middle of nowhere and told us to walk in a straight line until we get to the village. After about 30 minutes walk, we reached our destination. It was nothing fancy, but the village was definitely bigger than expected. Dogs, chickens, and goats roamed around freely. I was a city boy, so that was a first for me. We got to my grandparents' house and settled in. We spent the first few days resting, then decided to go to a spot that my father told me about the next morning. We headed out at daybreak. We packed plenty of water. The spot was close by, so we didn't think to pack any food. After about a 30-minute walk in the middle of a heavily wooded mountain, we got to our destination. It was a beautiful area with a huge tree and amazing view, but it wasn't enough for the 5 young idiots who came there to explore. So we kept moving forward, just looking around and having fun. But without realizing it, we had spent an extra hour and a half up there. We were exhausted and more importantly hungry, so we decided to head back. We followed the trail back, but we never reached that big tree again, even after an hour of fast walking. We began to panic and went from fast walking to jogging, but for some reason, even though we should have been backtracking, we didn't make it to the tree. It was there that we spotted an old woman walking the trail. We quickly approached her, said hello, and asked her how close the village. She looked at us weirdly and told us we were walking the opposite way and that the village was like a 3-hour walk. We were super exhausted by that point. 3 of us could barely stand, let alone walk for 3 hours. We explained to the old woman about our situation after she asked, and she offered us to rest at her place as it was close by, get a meal so we could get home safely. One of my friends, Adam, and I protested that it might be a bad idea to follow a stranger, even though we were in a rough situation. But between the hunger and the state of the others, we gave in and agreed. We followed her towards her cabin, small with a tiny garden in front of it and a goat tied to the post next to the door. Overall, it was nothing out of the ordinary in these parts of the country. We got in and sat down on those long sofas with no back support. She told us to wait while she got us some food. The cabin was very clean. The tables, chairs and sofas were obviously old and worn out, but not dusty, and overall the place looked very welcoming. However, Adam and I didn't fully drop our guard, while the others were simply happily they got a soft thing to sit on. 15 minutes later, she came out of the kitchen with 2 big plates of chicken with vegetables. A plate of salad and some olive oil came. She poured us tea and we dug in as she went back to the kitchen to prepare more. I was considering not eating, at least until I saw the others ate and are still good, but my hunger took over and I went right in as soon as the plates hit the table. Adam, however, didn't. He didn't lay a finger on the food, nor the tea. He was very paranoid and was the most fit out of all of us, so we managed to hold back. She brought 2 more plates of food that we cleaned up. She brought more tea and told us to rest and digest the food and leave whenever we felt like it. She then excused herself and went to her room to sleep as she was tired from cooking. We drifted off to sleep one by one. As I set up an alarm clock to ring after 30 minutes so we can move, I was the last one to drift to sleep, talking to Adam, who said he's going to stay awake and look around for a bit before we move. I was shaken awake by my friends who looked worried. I snapped awake after I saw their faces, and I looked around and asked them what was going on. One of them points out of the window and tells me to look. I didn't get it at first, but then I noticed. It was sunrise. I almost had a heart attack. I thought we overslept for a whole day, but it was worse. Adam was nowhere to be found. We went out of the cabin and called out, but no answer. So I went back in to ask the old woman. I knocked on the door to the room she went in before I fell asleep, but I got no response. The door was locked, so I decided to excuse myself and go in. When I did, it was the first time since I went on this trip that I was in full panic mode. There was no bed in that room. In fact, there was nothing. Like nothing at all, just 4 walls and a door. The kitchen was the same as well. I ran to my phone to try and call Adam. The signal there was weak, but it still worked, but my phone was off. Dead battery. It was around 70% when I fell asleep. All of our phones were dead, so we got out and started running on the trail towards the village while calling Adam's name. After a while, we met some people from the village, my grandparents' neighbours. They looked almost scared when they saw us. Then they dropped this bomb on all of us. Where were you the past 3 days? I was shocked. I was missing for 3 days. My parents got concerned because I didn't answer the phone and called those neighbours to ask about me. They even reported me missing. The whole village was looking for us for 2 days. We asked for help finding Adam, but after we told them what happened, they took us to a local mosque so that Imam could look into it. They believed it was witchcraft. We went back there the next day with some men from the village looking for Adam. We showed them the cabin and its surroundings. We looked for hours on end, but there was no sign of him. And anyway, we gave up when the police took over, but even they couldn't find much. To this day, I still wonder what happened. I am religious, but I just can't accept that that woman was a witch. Even if she was, why only Adam? Why not all of us? Is it because he didn't eat? Or because he went snooping around her cabin? A part of me wants to get back there so I can uncover the truth. But every time I think about this incident, I just feel a crippling fear of that fucking cabin. Towards the end of April, my boyfriend and I moved into a historic mansion. Of course, it's haunted. We expected it to be. I've been in tune with energies since I was younger, and have experienced paranormal encounters most of my life, but this is something I've never come across. A little backstory about the place. It was built in 1850, it's converted into an apartment complex. We live on the 3rd floor, and it's attic. The walls are small, and it's got a very vintage feeling. My neighbours told me that the mansion was built in 1850, and that was about it. As soon as we walked into the building, I knew something was there, but I didn't feel evil or bad. I was picking up a young female in her 20s. I could see she had brown hair, brown eyes, and wearing a lace purple dress. I also saw an old woman at the staircase, wearing a black veil and a black dress. Her face seemed to be hardened, like she was angry. I want to say she died of a stroke. In my dreams, I saw a young man, maybe in his 30s, with a black beard, green eyes, and a toddler wearing a white shirt, overalls, and black pants. I assume this home belonged to a family a while back. I never thought anything of it. My friends that came over would claim to have been watched, and they really don't like the staircase where the old lady stands. Since we've moved in here, we've heard knocking above us. We have an attic in our attic. I don't know, that's weird. And things have been moved or turned on. One night, when we had some friends over, we played Mario Kart, and the TV turned off completely. I told Sam, the young lady in a purple dress, to turn the TV back on, and sure enough, she did. Also, I'm not too sure if this is her real name, but it's the first thing that popped into my mind when I saw her. I would also like to point out, the minute we moved in, I burnt Palo Santo out in the living rooms, and all the rooms. And if you're familiar with black salt, I made sure to put some on every window in the house, including my son's. So everything is going fine and normal in our new place, until last night. Me and my family and my good friend were staying the night with us for a bit, because we're in the middle of a heat wave, and she has no AC in her apartment. We had a thunder and lightning storm. After I woke up with it, my baby was wide awake in pain, because he's 8 months old and has his 2 button teeth coming in. So I thought he was in pain. We are all sleeping out in the living room, on the floor near the AC. My boyfriend and I decided to put our son in his crib, since his fussiness wasn't going down. For some reason, I had a strange feeling that I needed to check the baby monitor, so I did. I have our monitor connected to my phone, and I go and open the app. As I hear my baby playing in his crib, laughing and talking, I see that there's something moving on the left side of the screen. I go to examine the figure on my phone for a minute, until I realised that what I saw moving wasn't a bug. It was too big to be a bug. Then my second thought was maybe it's a dust particle. I then realised that dust particles don't move that fast. Unless, of course... Unsure of what to make of this, I showed my boyfriend who is laying next to me. We both examined the monitor, and we both concluded that what we were seeing were orbs. We both entered in the room, and as soon as we do, his salt lamp flickered. Then it started to get cold. We both felt the salt lamp, and it was freezing. And remember, we're in the middle of a heat wave. All of a sudden, I get this cold, sad feeling coming from the corner of the room. I grab my baby out of his crib, and we move him back into the living room. As soon as I do this, we still have the monitor recording. The orbs are still there. The next morning, I posted the videos on Facebook. One of my friends took the video into Photoshop and saw a man's face at the end of the crib. Later, he found 2 women and a toddler. He sent me these pictures via Messenger, and he commented on the post with them, but the quality of the pictures aren't too great. For the past couple of months, I've been working at a slaughterhouse and plant in northern Wyoming. Great place. Best job I've ever had. Sincerely. I love it here. When I started, I worked as a meat cutter, but I wasn't particularly good at it. I eventually ended up on a cleanup, a position in which I've rarely excelled. I was the daytime cleaner, and there was a nighttime cleaner who worked in the plant after everyone else went home. I don't want to use his real name. Let's call him Dorothy Zbornak. So Dorothy worked here for quite some time before I got here, and I assisted him with anything I could during the hours or shifts overlapping. Then, Dorothy started talking about quitting. He expressed a great deal of discontentment and a desire to work closer to home. He told me he'd probably be leaving at the end of the summer and asked me not to say anything. I obliged. It's not my business. Then, he randomly quit one Friday night, leaving the place untouched and a colossal mess. The plant manager called me in on Saturday and asked me to clean it up. He also gave me Dorothy's job. That's where things get unsettling. My new shift has me working alone in this place until at least midnight every day of the week. no problem. I like being alone. But then the ghosts that apparently haunt this place began to mess with me. It started as random noises and shadows moving in my peripheral vision. Not frequently, but enough that I took notice. I asked another employee about it yesterday afternoon. Let's call him Wilmer Flintstone. I said to Wilmer, "Have you ever noticed anything strange or paranormal around here?" "Early in the morning I have," they replied. "Before everyone else gets here. This place is a little lively." "I notice that it's a little lively when I'm by myself too," I said. "Noises, shadows, voices." "Voices?" Wilmer asked. "Yeah," I explained. "Voices in other rooms. Quiet whispering that I can't quite make out. There shouldn't be voices if I'm the only person in the building." "You're not crazy," Wilmer said with a smile. "You're not the only one who's experienced things. Maybe someone died here or something." "Like who?" "I don't know," Wilmer said. Then, with a laugh, "We do kill a lot of animals here." I can't imagine the ghosts of 1,000 dead cows and pigs standing around in the packaging office have a verbal conversation, I told him. It got me thinking, though, and I told him as much. The area we inhabit used to be native land. I think Shoshone? Not sure. But it wouldn't be too far-fetched if our plant was built over some native burial ground or something, and we're actually working on top of 1,000 deceased skeletons. Native American spirits tend to get upset when you disturb their eternal slumber. Well, whatever these unseen beings are, whether they are natives or just a lot of really unhappy dead cows, I decided to have a conversation with them last night after everyone left. "Okay, ghosties, here's the deal. I don't know what your endgame is. I don't know what you hope to accomplish. Are you trying to drive me away? Are you trying to spook me? I have no qualms with you, and I would prefer if we could find a way to coexist. I have a job to do, and the job pays my bills. I have no intention of leaving. You're apparently stuck here because..." I looked around to emphasize the point. "If it was me, this is the absolute last place I'd want to spend eternity." "Well, I guess it beats the fiery pit, but not by much." "So you can't leave, and I won't. So could you guys just give me some space? Could you not mess with me? I don't think being dead removes your ability to be reasonable, and I'd really appreciate it." This did not go as I expected. They messed with me even harder. They apparently didn't like being asked to socially distance. The shadows came more frequently, and there were at least 2 times when the shapes in my peripheral vision weren't shapes at all. They were people. When I jerked my head to look, they'd be gone. There was one point where I was going to dump a mop bucket and I heard what sounded like footsteps directly behind me, less than a foot away. I drove almost headfirst into the nearest room, slammed the door shut and locked it. I looked into like a lock on a door is going to keep a Casper the Salty Ghost out. I finished my work as fast as I could and then practically ran to my vehicle. I floored the accelerator and sped off like I was being chased. I'm not so sure they weren't chasing me. There was the briefest moment that I thought I saw someone in my passenger seat right before I pulled out. I don't know what to do. I'm actually afraid of these things. I can't go to my boss and ask him to move me off the nights because ghosts. I cannot and will not quit. I'm making too much money and my life has drastically improved and stabilized from what it was. I won't let them drive me away. But I'm scared, and I don't know if there's anything I can do to make it up. Maybe I ought not to have tried to reason with them. Maybe I should have acknowledged them at all. Either way, the damage is done, and I've angered something I don't really understand. Before I'm getting started, I don't really believe in ghosts. That's mostly because I've never seen concrete evidence for their existence, and because the thought of them creeps me out. But lately, I've been thinking that there might actually be a possibility that they are real. The house I'm currently living in is from my deceased grandparents, and it has a ground floor and a basement. It's in a really peaceful area, and I'm loving it here. However, the basement is creepy. I was around 10ish when I first stepped into the basement, and as most kids would be, I was scared. I avoided going down there, and when my mother asked me why, I told her something along the lines of, "I think someone is down there." Typical behaviour for children. This fear never left me though. I'm now an adult, and this area of the house still gives me the chills. It's not the whole basement, just the one room, the gaming room of my siblings. The rest of the basement is not creepy at all, since we have lights with motion detectors everywhere. However, when I get near the room, my heart starts racing, almost as if I'm about to have an anxiety attack. I don't know why, it's confusing. Once I'm in the room, I start sweating and I feel as if someone is watching me. Sometimes I see shadows out of the corner of my eyes. It's just creepy. The door to that room, which I always close, has milky glass in it. I've noticed it multiple times that I saw silhouettes moving, which shouldn't be possible. My fitness room is next to the gaming room, and I'm able to see the motion triggered up lights go on whenever someone goes into the other room, through the little gap below the door. Often, when light goes on in the other room, I blame my family, thinking they might be there. But the light also went on when I knew for sure that no one was besides me was at home. This happened multiple times. Maybe the lights were broken? I already told you that I feel like someone is in that room, and for the longest time, I believed I was just crazy. Maybe some fears from my childhood stuck with me, or maybe it was just hysteria. The odd thing, my girlfriend also dislikes that room. When she first slept over at my place, we went into the basement to get some alcohol. She, however, stood in front of that room and wouldn't dare to go in there, and told me that she would wait for me. I didn't give it much thought and chalked up to her not liking basements in general. A few months ago, I told her that there was a room in the house which always causes me to panic, and within seconds she asked me, the room across the stairs, the gaming room? I asked her how she knew that it was that room, and she replied that she felt like something was in there, therefore she avoids that place. She also told me about seeing shadows out of the corner of her eyes. Mind you, I never talked to anyone about my feelings towards that specific room. It's been getting worse. I see the shadows more often, and I've been starting to notice some odd noises like rustling and something softly tapping on the door. It might just be my brain playing tricks on me and wanting to hear something spooky, but it's slowly driving me insane. I need to know what might cause this and how I can fight my irrational fear of that one room. I'm now really desperate and will be glad for any advice, because if it goes on like this, I'll never step foot in a basement again.